The thing about diplomatic vessels is that they're designed by committee, which means they're designed by idiots. The Convergence Protocol exemplified this principle perfectly, a kilometer-long monument to bureaucratic compromise, featuring corridors wide enough for the hegemony's battle chassis warriors, ceiling heights accommodating the consortium's crystalline spires, and atmospheric processes that somehow managed to make the air taste like disappointment to all three species simultaneously. Ambassador Jen Tai of the Void Syndicate had been complaining about the ventilation for the better part of an hour when Commander Vexthal made his entrance. 2.5 meters of chitinous authority wrapped in ceremonial combat plating, he moved through the diplomatic chamber with the subtle grace of a falling building. The commander's neural processors, enhanced with the latest hegemony wetware, calculated trajectories, threat assessments, and political ramifications at roughly 3,000 operations per second. They did not, apparently, calculate the presence of one small human standing directly in his path. The Syndicate's position remains unchanged, Jen Tai was saying, her shadow form flickering with agitation. The mining rights to Kepler 442b belong to whoever can. Vexthal's armored shoulder caught the human diplomat squarely in the chest. Physics took over from there, launching her backward toward the polished deck plating with the inevitability of gravity itself. What happened next would be debated in academic circles for decades. The human's body twisted midair, one small fist describing a perfect arc that intersected with Vexthal's mandible at precisely the moment his enhanced reflexes began processing the collision. The sound, a wet crack followed by the musical chime of breaking chitin, echoed through the chamber like a dinner bell in a mausoleum. Commander Vexthal, veteran of 47 border conflicts and holder of the Golden Claw for tactical excellence, dropped like a sack of defective machinery. The silence that followed lasted exactly 2.3 seconds, which was enough time for every diplomatic protocol in 3 different star systems to simultaneously burst into flames. "Well," said Dr. Kethvar of the Crystalline Consortium, his mineral voice carrying undertones of fascination, "that was unexpected." Jen Tai's shadow form solidified as she stared at the unconscious commander. Did that just happen? The human diplomat, Elena Vasquez, according to her credentials, though she'd introduced herself simply as the Earth representative, picked herself up and dusted off a sensible gray suit. "I'm sorry, is he all right? He startled me." "Startled you?" Jen Tai's voice climbed several octaves. "You just assaulted a hegemony battle commander." "I didn't assault anyone," Elena replied, checking her sleeve for tears. "He walked into me. I just reacted." Dr. Kethvar extended a crystalline appendage toward the fallen commander, sensors flickering. "Fascinating. The neural activity suggests complete unconsciousness. The mandibular structure appears to be compromised." Compromised. Jen Tai flickered between forms, agitation making her corporeal boundaries unstable. "His jaw is hanging off his face." "That's an exaggeration," Elena said. "It's just dislocated. Maybe fractured. Possibly in several places." The chamber's emergency systems finally activated, bathing everything in the soothing blue glow that indicated diplomatic incident in progress. Medical drones descended from hidden alcoves, their sensors sweeping the unconscious commander while maintenance bots began documenting the scene for insurance purposes. Jen Tai to security, the Syndicate ambassador spoke into her comm unit. "We have a Code 17 in the primary negotiation chamber." "A Code 17?" Elena asked. "Unprovoked assault on a ranking military officer." "It wasn't unprovoked. He knocked me down. He walked into you." "Same thing from my perspective." Dr. Kethvar's crystalline form shifted to a diagnostic configuration. "Perhaps we should focus on the medical situation. Commander Vexthal appears to be experiencing significant trauma to both his facial structure and his pride." The medical drones had surrounded Vexthal now, their gentle hums mixing with the concerned chirping of the chamber's artificial intelligence. One of them deployed a specialized scanner, its readout painting holographic injury assessments in the air above the commander's motionless form. Bilateral mandibular fracture, announced the lead medical drone in its aggressively cheerful voice. Severe concussion. Damaged neural interface in the left temporal lobe. Estimated recovery time, 6 to 8 standard weeks. 8 weeks. Gentai's form flickered wildly. The trade summit is in 3 days. Then you'd better find another hegemony representative, Elena said. Because this one's going to be drinking through a straw for the next 2 months. You cannot be serious, Gentai said. Do you understand what you've done? The hegemony will demand reparations. They'll want your head on a ceremonial spike. This could mean war. Elena blinked. War? Over an accident. Accident. Gentai's voice reached frequencies that made the chamber's resonance dampeners whine in protest. You broke a battle commander's face. He's fine. Mostly. Dr. Kethvar rotated his primary sensor cluster toward Elena. If I may ask, how did you move so quickly? Our preliminary analysis suggests the collision occurred at time index 14 hours 33 minutes and 27.4 seconds, and your counterattack was completed by 14 hours 33 minutes and 27.7 seconds. That's a reaction time of 0.3 seconds. That's not particularly fast, Elena said. It is for conscious thought. Elena frowned. Who said anything about conscious thought? The crystalline scientist's form brightened with interest. You mean the response was involuntary? Of course it was involuntary. Someone shoved me, I hit back. Basic reflexes. Reflexes, Dr. Kethvar repeated, as if the word were a particularly complex mathematical theorem. Unconscious defensive responses, Elena explained. Surely your species have them too. Gentai and Dr. Kethvar exchanged what might have been glances, if either of them had possessed traditional visual organs. No, said Dr. Kethvar slowly. We do not. The medical drones finished their preliminary assessment and began the delicate process of moving Commander Vexthal to the ship's medical bay. His jaw, Elena noticed, really was hanging at an unusual angle. She felt a small pang of guilt, though she wasn't entirely sure why. Look, she said, I'm sorry he got hurt. I truly am. But he knocked me down, and I reacted. That's how humans work. That's how humans work, Gentai repeated flatly. Generally speaking, yes. You have weaponized involuntary responses. We have survival instincts. There's a difference. Dr. Kethvar's crystalline matrix pulsed with what might have been excitement. This requires immediate study. If humans possess unconscious defensive capabilities, the implications for galactic security protocols are terrifying, Gentai finished. The implications are terrifying. Elena looked between them, suddenly aware that she might have stumbled into something considerably more complicated than a simple misunderstanding. It's really not that impressive. Any human would have done the same thing. Any human, Dr. Kethvar mused. Any human, Gentai echoed, her form solidifying into something that resembled deep concern. The chamber fell silent again, broken only by the gentle hum of life support systems and the distant sound of medical equipment being deployed in the ship's infirmary. Elena had the distinct impression that she'd just said something incredibly stupid, though she couldn't quite figure out what. Perhaps, Dr. Kethvar said eventually, we should postpone the trade negotiations. Postpone them? Elena asked. For how long? Gentai's form flickered one final time before settling into a configuration that suggested resignation. Until we figure out what the hell we're dealing with. Outside the chamber's viewports, 3 separate fleets maintained their careful formation, their crews blissfully unaware that the fate of interstellar commerce might now depend on understanding why humans punch things that scare them. Elena sighed and straightened her jacket. It was going to be a very long diplomatic mission. 48 hours later, Elena found herself the subject of more scientific scrutiny than a newly discovered particle. The Convergence Protocol Science Wing had been hastily converted into what Dr. Kethvar euphemistically called a research facility, though it looked more like an interrogation chamber designed by someone with a profound misunderstanding of human anatomy. "Please place your hand on the neural interface," Dr. Kethvar requested, his crystalline form refracting the harsh laboratory lighting into prismatic patterns across the walls. Elena eyed the device skeptically. It resembled a metallic sea urchin having an anxiety attack. "What exactly does this thing do?" "It measures cognitive processing speed during stimulus response scenarios. We need to understand the biological mechanisms behind your defensive capabilities." "You make it sound like I breathe fire." "From our perspective, you might as well." The past 2 days had been a masterclass in interspecies confusion. Every test, every measurement, every attempt to quantify human reflexes had yielded results that violated everything the 3 species thought they knew about conscious decision-making. Elena had broken 3 more testing devices, dented a reinforced wall, and somehow managed to catch a falling wrench before anyone else in the room realized it had been dropped. "The preliminary data suggests your neural pathways bypass conscious thought entirely," Dr. Kethvar continued, adjusting the interface with crystalline appendages that moved like liquid geometry. "This contradicts our fundamental understanding of intelligent behavior." "Maybe your fundamental understanding needs work." From the observation deck, Gentai's voice crackled through the intercom. "The Hegemony's chief strategist arrived this morning. She's demanding a full analysis of human combat capabilities." "Combat capabilities?" Elena pulled her hand back from the interface. "I broke someone's jaw by accident. I'm not a walking weapon." "Aren't you?" The new voice belonged to someone Elena hadn't met, deep, resonant, with the kind of authority that made furniture nervous. She turned to see a figure materializing in the laboratory's secondary entrance. Strategic Coordinator Velnora of the Hegemony moved like controlled violence wrapped in diplomatic courtesy. Where Commander Vexthal had been bulky and obvious, Velnora possessed the refined menace of a blade disguised as a dinner fork. Her chitinous plates bore the scars of genuine warfare, and her neural interfaces glowed with active processing power that made the room's electronics hum in sympathy. "Coordinator," Dr. Kethvar acknowledged. "I wasn't expecting your personal involvement. One of my officers is currently having his mandible reconstructed with titanium supports," Velnora replied. "I consider that personal involvement enough." Elena crossed her arms. "How is Commander Vexthal? I've been asking for updates." "Conscious. Embarrassed. Requesting reassignment to the furthest possible posting from Earth space." Velnora's compound eyes fixed on Elena with uncomfortable intensity. "He's also deeply curious about human military training protocols." "Military training? I work in agricultural trade negotiations." "Then how do you fight?" "I don't fight. I react." Velnora's head tilted in a motion that somehow conveyed both confusion and threat assessment. "Explain the distinction." Elena glanced at Dr. Kethvar, who had positioned himself between her and the Hegemony coordinator like a crystalline barrier. The Syndicate observer remained safely ensconced behind reinforced glass, which probably said something about everyone's confidence in the current situation. "Look," Elena said. "When something startles me, I don't think, oh, I should defend myself now. My body just does things. Fast things. It's evolution. Millions of years of not getting eaten by things with teeth." "Your species evolved to attack without thought," Velnora stated. "We evolved to survive without hesitation." "Those are the same thing." "No, they're really not." Dr. Kethvar's form brightened with what Elena had learned to recognize as scientific excitement. "Perhaps we should demonstrate the difference. Coordinator, if you would observe our testing protocols." "I'd rather participate in them." The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Elena felt that familiar tightness in her chest that usually preceded either fight or flight, though in this case, neither option seemed particularly diplomatic. "That might not be wise," Dr. Kethvar said carefully. "I'm not going to hurt her," Velnora replied. I want to understand how she hurt him. It was an accident. Prove it. Elena found herself in the awkward position of trying to explain something she'd never consciously thought about. How do you describe breathing to someone who's never had lungs? How do you explain instinct to species that apparently consulted committees before sneezing? Fine, she said. But when this goes badly, remember that I tried to warn you. The impromptu experiment took place in the laboratory's testing chamber, with Dr. Kethvar monitoring from a safe distance and Jen Tai providing running commentary from behind her reinforced observation window. Velnora approached Elena with the calculated precision of a chess master, every movement deliberate and announced by the gentle whir of her neural processors. I'm going to reach toward you, Velnora said. Slowly. Do not react. That's not how reflexes work. Try. Velnora extended one clawed appendage toward Elena's shoulder. Elena watched it approach, consciously trying to remain still, right up until some ancient circuit in her brainstem decided that claws near her throat constituted an unacceptable risk. Her hand moved before she could stop it, deflecting Velnora's arm with enough force to send the coordinator staggering backward. The motion had taken perhaps half a second. Elena's conscious mind was still processing the decision to stay still. Fascinating, Dr. Kethvar breathed. Velnora straightened, her compound eyes reflecting something that might have been respect. Again. Maybe we should. Again. The second attempt yielded identical results, as did the third. By the fourth test, Elena was sweating from the effort of trying to override her own nervous system, while Velnora bore the expression of someone encountering a particularly elegant mathematical proof. Your conscious mind has no authority over these responses, Velnora observed. That's what I've been trying to tell you. How do you control it? You don't. That's the point. From the observation deck, Jen Tai's voice carried a note of barely controlled panic. Are we documenting this? Someone needs to be documenting this. Dr. Kethvar's recording devices had been running continuously, capturing biorhythms and neural patterns that painted a picture of human physiology unlike anything in the galactic medical databases. Elena's brain activity showed decision-making processes that occurred entirely below the threshold of consciousness, pathways that operated on timescales measured in fractions of seconds rather than the deliberative minutes preferred by the other species. This changes everything, Velnora said quietly. Changes what? Military doctrine. Diplomatic protocols. First contact procedures. The coordinator's gaze fixed on Elena with new intensity. If all humans possess these capabilities. Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the laboratory's climate control. They do. We all do. Unconscious violence. Instantaneous threat response. No conscious control. It's not violence, it's a weapon that doesn't know it's a weapon, Jen Tai interrupted through the intercom. Carried by a species that doesn't know they're carrying it. Dr. Kethvar's crystalline form pulsed with rapid calculations. The implications for interspecies contact protocols are staggering. If humans can respond to perceived threats in microseconds, then every human is potentially dangerous, Velnora finished. Not through malice, but through biology. Elena looked between them, finally understanding the scope of what she'd accidentally revealed. It wasn't just about a broken jaw anymore. It was about the fundamental assumptions underlying galactic civilization, assumptions that apparently didn't account for species that could throw punches faster than they could form thoughts. So what happens now? She asked. Velnora and Dr. Kethvar exchanged glances, a moment of silent communication between species that had spent centuries learning to telegraph their intentions well in advance. Now, Velnora said, we figure out what to do with a species that weaponized evolution. The emergency session convened in the Convergence Protocol's primary council chamber at 0600 ship time, which was either very early or very late depending on which species' circadian preferences you consulted. Elena had been summoned as what the official documentation termed essential witness testimony, though she suspected the real reason was that nobody wanted to make decisions about humanity without a human present to accidentally demonstrate why those decisions might be catastrophically wrong. The chamber itself had been reconfigured overnight, with additional security barriers, recording equipment, and what appeared to be a small medical station positioned strategically near Elena's designated seat. Paranoia, she reflected, was apparently a universal constant. The hegemony's position is non-negotiable, announced Fleet Admiral Kesthora, Velnora's superior and owner of the most impressively scarred carapace Elena had yet encountered. Humans represent an unacceptable security risk to all galactic commerce. We demand immediate suspension of Earth's trading privileges pending comprehensive biological assessment. Chancellor Mordeth of the Consortium's Trade Guild materialized his response in crystalline harmony, his mineral voice resonating through frequencies that made Elena's teeth ache. The Consortium objects. Suspension of trading rights violates 17 separate interstellar agreements. We propose enhanced monitoring protocols instead. Enhanced monitoring of what? Gentai demanded from her position at the Syndicate's floating delegation platform. Involuntary biological functions. Should we install neural dampeners on every human ship? Elena cleared her throat. Excuse me, but... The witness will remain silent until called upon, Admiral Kesthora declared. I'm not a witness, I'm a person. And I'm right here listening to you plan my species' future without bothering to ask what we think about it. The Admiral's compound eyes swiveled toward Elena with mechanical precision. What your species thinks is irrelevant. What your species does unconsciously is the issue under discussion. What we do unconsciously is survive. I'm sorry that makes you uncomfortable. Chancellor Mordetha's crystalline form shifted to project diplomatic concern. The comfort level of individual species is not the primary consideration. Galactic stability requires predictable behavioral parameters. And humans, Gentai added, are apparently the definition of unpredictable. Elena stood up, ignoring the subtle mechanical whir of security systems tracking her movement. 3 different species worth of defensive protocols had just activated because she'd risen from her chair, which somehow perfectly illustrated the absurdity of the entire situation. You want to know what's unpredictable? She asked. Calling an emergency session to discuss banning an entire species because one person had a completely normal reaction to being knocked down. Normal, Admiral Kesthora repeated. You consider violent assault to be normal behavior. I consider defending myself to be normal behavior. The violence was incidental. Incidental violence that shattered military-grade armor plating. Elena blinked. What? Velnora activated a holographic display that showed the aftermath of Elena's encounter with Commander Vexthal. The image rotated slowly, highlighting fracture patterns in the commander's facial armor that Elena hadn't noticed during the original incident. Standard hegemony combat plating, Velnora explained. Rated to withstand directed energy weapons up to Class 7 intensity. Your unconscious defensive response cracked it in 3 places. That's impossible. I hit him with my fist, not a plasma cannon. Precisely. Which raises questions about human physical capabilities that we're not prepared to answer. Chancellor Mordetha's form brightened with renewed interest. Perhaps we should focus on the economic implications. If humans possess enhanced physical strength coupled with instantaneous response times, their value as a trading partner could be. Could be what? Gentai interrupted. Irrelevant when they're unconsciously destroying everything they touch. We don't destroy everything we touch, Elena protested. We've been members of Galactic Society for 15 years without incident. Without documented incident, Admiral Kesthora corrected. We're reviewing every human interaction in our databases. Preliminary analysis suggests a pattern of what your species terms accidents that correlate suspiciously with moments of interpersonal tension. Elena felt a familiar tightness in her chest, the same sensation that had preceded her reflexive response to Commander Vexthal. The irony wasn't lost on her. Discussing human defensive reflexes was triggering her defensive reflexes. "Show me this pattern," she said. The holographic display shifted to present a timeline of human-alien interactions over the past decade and a half. Incident markers dotted the chronology like red warning lights. A human freighter captain who'd accidentally damaged a docking collar during a tense negotiation. A human botanist whose startled reaction had somehow resulted in a consortium researcher requiring medical attention. A human diplomat whose nervous gesture had been interpreted as a threat display by syndicate security. 15 years of escalating incidents, Admiral Kesthora concluded. All dismissed as accidents or misunderstandings. All involving humans reacting faster than conscious thought should allow. Elena stared at the data, pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place with uncomfortable clarity. "You think we've been unconsciously intimidating you this entire time?" "We think," Gentai said carefully, "that your species has been operating on biological imperatives that our diplomatic protocols weren't designed to handle. And now that we understand the scope of the problem," Admiral Kesthora added, "we must address it before it escalates further." Chancellor Mordetha's crystalline matrix pulsed with calculated concern. The consortium proposes a compromise. Establish quarantine protocols for human majority systems. Limit direct contact to essential personnel with comprehensive behavioral modification training. Behavioral modification. Elena's voice climbed several octaves. "You want to reprogram us. We want to make interspecies contact safe for all parties involved." Elena looked around the chamber, taking in the faces, or equivalent anatomical features, of beings who were seriously discussing the prospect of altering human neurology to make them more comfortable. The security barriers, the medical station, the way every alien in the room positioned themselves just slightly out of her reach, it all made horrible sense now. "You're afraid of us," she said. "We're being pragmatic," Admiral Kesthora replied. "You're terrified that humans might be dangerous, so you want to make us less human. We want to make you more predictable." Elena felt that familiar sensation building in her chest again, the primal recognition of a threat that required response. But this time, she recognized it for what it was, not just her nervous system preparing for fight or flight, but 15 million years of evolution suddenly faced with the prospect of extinction through bureaucratic committee. "No," she said. The chamber fell silent. 3 species worth of enhanced senses and processing power focused on one small human who had just delivered the shortest diplomatic response in galactic history. "No." Chancellor Mordeth inquired. "No modifications. No quarantines. No behavioral reprogramming." Elena's voice carried the same quiet authority that had made Admiral Kesthora's carapace plates shift defensively. "You want to understand humans? Then understand this. We survived everything our planet could throw at us because we evolved to react first and think later. That's not a bug in our programming, it's the feature that kept us alive long enough to build starships." "And what happens," Gentai asked quietly, "when that feature conflicts with galactic civilization?" Elena smiled, and somehow that expression made every alien in the room take a step backward. "Then maybe galactic civilization needs to evolve too." 6 months after what historians would eventually term the reflex crisis, Elena found herself back aboard a diplomatic vessel, though this one bore little resemblance to the cramped, committee-designed nightmare of the Convergence Protocol. The adaptive harmony featured wider corridors, softer lighting, and what the design specifications euphemistically called species-appropriate personal space requirements. Translation: enough room for humans to move naturally without accidentally starting wars. The quarterly incident reports show a 73% reduction in cross-species misunderstandings, announced Director Keth Val, the consortium's newly appointed human liaison coordinator. His crystalline form had been modified with smoother edges and dampened resonance frequencies, changes that would have been unthinkable before the crisis, but which apparently made him more comfortable working alongside beings who might sneeze unexpectedly. Elena reviewed the holographic display floating between them, data streams showing the gradual transformation of galactic society over the past half-year. new architectural standards for mixed-species facilities, revised diplomatic protocols that accounted for unconscious behavioral responses, training programs that taught alien personnel to recognize and accommodate human reaction patterns. Impressive, she said. Though I notice the hegemony's numbers are still higher than the others. Military cultures adapt slowly, Kethval acknowledged, though Admiral Kesthora's recent policy changes suggest progress. Elena smiled at that. The Admiral's policy changes had begun 3 months ago when a human security specialist, startled by an unexpected door chime, had inadvertently demonstrated the effectiveness of human defensive reflexes against hegemony restraint protocols. Rather than escalate the incident, Kesthora had commissioned a comprehensive study of human integration techniques. The resulting report had apparently made for fascinating reading in military circles. Speaking of the Admiral, Elena said, she wanted to discuss the new training facility specifications. Yes, Project Instinct. The hegemony's attempt to develop their own unconscious response capabilities. Kethval's form brightened with what Elena had learned to recognize as crystalline amusement. Early reports suggest limited success. Elena had seen those reports. Watching hegemony warriors attempt to bypass their own neural processes and act on impulse had produced results that were simultaneously hilarious and slightly terrifying. Turns out that when you spend millennia evolving deliberative consciousness, teaching yourself to throw punches without thinking is remarkably difficult. The door chimed, softly, in accordance with new mixed-species protocols, and Commander Vexthal entered the briefing room. His titanium jaw reconstruction gleamed under the ambient lighting, and his gait carried the subtle hesitation of someone who had learned to announce his presence well in advance of making physical contact with anything. Ambassador Vasquez, he said, using Elena's new title with careful pronunciation. Director Kethval. Commander, Elena replied. How's the jaw? Functional. The titanium actually provides enhanced durability compared to the original chitin. He paused, compound eyes focusing on Elena with what might have been curiosity. I wanted to thank you. Thank me. For breaking your face. For teaching us something we didn't know we needed to learn. Elena gestured for him to sit, noting how he chose a chair positioned at a diplomatically appropriate distance. Close enough for conversation, far enough to avoid triggering anyone's defensive reflexes. The new furniture had been designed with similar considerations, featuring rounded edges and impact-absorbing materials that could withstand the occasional unconscious collision. The hegemony's integration protocols are working well, she asked. Better than expected. Our border skirmishes with the Kethmari Collective have decreased by 90% since we started deploying human advisors. Elena raised an eyebrow. Human advisors. Turns out that having personnel who can respond to threats faster than enemy targeting computers can acquire locks provides significant tactical advantages, Vexthal explained. The Collective's battle doctrine assumes deliberative engagement patterns. They're unprepared for opponents who react instinctively. Director Kethval's form pulsed with interest. The consortium has noted similar effects in our trade negotiations. Human representatives seem to possess an intuitive understanding of when discussions are becoming adversarial, often responding to hostility before it becomes consciously apparent to other species. Emotional intelligence meets evolutionary programming, Elena mused. We read micro-expressions and body language without thinking about it, then react accordingly. Precisely. Your species processes social threat assessment through the same neural pathways that govern physical defense mechanisms. Elena considered this, watching Commander Vexthal as he unconsciously adjusted his posture to mirror her own, a behavior modification technique that the hegemony had apparently adopted wholesale after discovering that humans were more comfortable around aliens who telegraphed their intentions through familiar body language. So we've gone from being considered a threat to being considered an asset, she said. More than an asset, Vexthal replied. A catalyst. The integration of human behavioral patterns has forced us to reconsider fundamental assumptions about consciousness, decision-making, and social interaction. The Syndicate shadow brokers are particularly fascinated, Kethval added. They've begun incorporating human consultants into their information-gathering operations. Apparently, your species' ability to detect deception through unconscious behavioral cues rivals their most sophisticated analysis algorithms. Elena laughed, a sound that no longer made the room's occupants tense reflexively. So let me get this straight. You were terrified that humans were unconsciously dangerous, and now you're hiring us because we're unconsciously useful. The galaxy has learned to work with human nature rather than against it, Vexthal said. Though I suspect we're still discovering implications we haven't considered. Such as? The philosophical ramifications alone are staggering. If consciousness can be bypassed for both physical and social responses, what does that mean for concepts of individual agency, free will, moral responsibility? Elena grinned. Welcome to being human, Commander. We've been grappling with those questions for millennia. The briefing concluded with standard diplomatic pleasantries, but Elena lingered as the others departed. Through the Adaptive Harmony's viewports, she could see the steady stream of mixed-species vessels moving through the commercial shipping lanes, Hegemony warships escorting consortium trade fleets, Syndicate intelligence vessels operating openly alongside human exploration craft, all of them following revised protocols designed around the reality of unconscious human responses. 6 months ago, she'd been a minor agricultural trade negotiator whose biggest concern was grain tariffs. Now she held the title of Senior Ambassador for Involuntary Diplomatic Actions, a position that apparently hadn't existed until someone needed to formalize humanity's role as the species that had accidentally revolutionized galactic society by punching people faster than they could think. Her personal communicator chimed with an incoming message from Earth's diplomatic corps. Another incident report, probably. Some human somewhere had undoubtedly startled an alien and triggered another round of integration discussions. The pattern had become routine. Unconscious human behavior would create a diplomatic situation, which would lead to analysis and adaptation, which would result in improved interspecies understanding. Elena deleted the message without reading it. After 6 months of turning accidents into breakthroughs, she'd learned that sometimes the best diplomatic response was simply to let humanity be human. Outside the viewport, a human cargo vessel was docking with a Hegemony trading station. The docking procedure proceeded smoothly, following protocols that accounted for the possibility that someone might sneeze, jump, or accidentally break something important during the process. It was a small thing, really. Just two species learning to work together despite fundamental differences in how their nervous systems operated. But small things, Elena reflected, had a way of changing everything. Especially when they happened faster than anyone could think to stop them.